The decline of tradition continues relentlessly. The Pope has removed an archbishop considered by many faithful to be a true defender of the faith, right after an incident that has disturbed American Catholics. In his place, a bishop with clearly liberal views has been appointed. The protests were immediate, and some particularly harsh. Here's the whole story. Among the events stirring up the Catholic community right now, the replacement of Archbishop Joseph Naumann, the respected longtime leader of the Kansas City Diocese, stands out. Pope Francis recently accepted his letter of resignation, as is customary upon reaching 75 years of age. But what's puzzling many observers is the swiftness of the decision, and especially the choice of his successor, Bishop Sean McKnight. Bishop McKnight, coming from the Jefferson City Diocese, is known for a pastoral vision decidedly more in line with the current Vatican positions. In recent years, he has firmly defended pandemic containment measures and has expressed opinions that, according to many of the faithful, seem less firm on some sensitive issues of Catholic doctrine, such as giving the Eucharist to politicians who support laws contrary to the Church's teachings. This episode is part of a broader context, which some define as a gradual distancing from certain elements of Catholic tradition. It's not merely a difference in style, but a pastoral direction that, according to numerous observers, tends to favor a more open dialogue with contemporary society at the expense of continuity with the traditional teachings of the Church. The Naumann-McKnight case, therefore, represents another sign of this ongoing transformation, a decision that puzzles many of the faithful who wonder what kind of spiritual leadership is emerging and what the future holds for communities more closely tied to liturgical and doctrinal tradition. To make Archbishop Naumann's departure even more relevant, and in a way unsettling, is the context in which it occurred. Just a few days earlier, the Archbishop had stepped into the public eye for leading a public and spiritual response to an unprecedented event in modern American history. The announcement of a Black Mass, an openly provocative satanic ceremony held on March 28th right in front of the Kansas state capitol in Topeka. The event, organized by a group called the Satanic Grotto, caused deep outrage, especially because of their stated intention, and later the subject of legal action by the Archbishop himself, to use consecrated communion wafers during the ritual. Even though there's no real proof that the hosts were actually consecrated, just the thought of someone messing with something so holy to Catholics got thousands of believers across the state fired up. Naumann responded firmly, but didn't go overboard. He called for a special Mass, a Mass of reparation, and a time of Eucharistic adoration at the Mater Dei Church, which is right across the street from the state capitol building. Not only Catholics participated, but also many Christians from other denominations. It wasn't simply a protest, but a true public manifestation of faith. At the same time, the Archbishop filed a legal request to get back any possibly stolen liturgical objects, highlighting the priceless spiritual value that these represent for the Church. This intense and public act of witness, which required courage and pastoral clarity, seemed to many like one of Naumann's last acts as bishop, before his term was ended with surprising swiftness. And it is right here that some glimpse a connection. A bishop who exposes himself so openly in defense of the faith is replaced almost without explanation by a figure more aligned with the cautious and conciliatory language that characterizes a fraction of the contemporary episcopate. The Kansas episode isn't an isolated case, but rather seems to be part of a broader pattern that has worried many of the faithful for some time. A gradual replacement of pastors rooted in Catholic tradition, with personalities who express a line more in tune with the contemporary spirit. This orientation, which some interpret as a pastoral strategy oriented towards dialogue with today's society, is perceived by others, however, as a true silent dismantling of Catholic identity, carried out through appointments, reorganizations, and a growing marginalization of dissenting voices. Among the most important voices commenting on Archbishop Naumann's replacement by Bishop McKnight, Father Charles Moore stands out. He hasn't hesitated to call this a part of a much larger strategy. This isn't an isolated incident. It's exactly what we've seen happening for over a decade. Strong bishops, rooted in doctrine and able to communicate clearly, are being replaced with others who are less clear or simply more aligned with the new pastoral direction. Father Moore has spoken with regret, but also with a certain bitter irony, pointing out how they aren't even trying to hide certain decisions anymore. It's not that they're looking for balance or finding a middle ground. It's like surgery, but performed with an axe. They're getting rid of anything that reminds people of tradition and putting in figures who don't cause trouble, who don't ask questions, who don't resist. Especially alarming, according to the priest, is how quickly Naumann's resignation was accepted, just weeks after he took a public stance that made him even more prominent in the church landscape. They didn't want to wait, as if they were in a hurry to turn the page, to silence a witness who was too uncomfortable, and the designated successor, even with all the personal qualities he may have, represents a clear change of course. However, as always, Father Moore didn't limit himself to criticism, but instead issued a call. It is in the moments when the guides fail that the people of God must become the guides. It is up to the faithful, the priests, the families, to safeguard what has been passed down. This isn't a time for discouragement. It's a time for peaceful resistance, made of faith, prayer, and solid formation. To further fuel the discussion, the harsh words of Archbishop Emeritus of La Plata, Hector Aguirre, have arrived. In a public address that quickly spread throughout the Catholic world, Aguirre expressed a drastic judgment about Pope Francis's papacy, with whom he served for years in Argentina as an auxiliary bishop. According to Aguirre, the Holy Father is an adversary of tradition and of those who identify with it. But the statement that made the biggest impact was the one that directly referred to the Pope's spiritual and personal dimension. The health of his soul has deteriorated, he declared, and it is no longer easily healed. Aguirre did not speak out of personal resentment, but out of a concern for the Church, which, according to him, affects the very essence of the faith passed down through the centuries. The main task of a pope, he stated, is to preserve and transmit tradition. When someone chooses to oppose it, something breaks, first in the Church, but perhaps even earlier in the man who governs it. Aguirre's words, though harsh, reflect a growing internal fracture. On one side, there's a group of bishops increasingly selected for their alignment with a fluid and inclusive pastoral vision. On the other hand, some of the faithful and pastors see this as a dangerous slide towards ambiguity and a loss of identity. What do you think? If you liked the video, comment Amen. God bless you.